Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome back into another edition of the Hog Roundup with Tye Richardson. As always, that's Tye Richardson. I'm Evan Kamiko. Thanks for joining us, Tye. It's been a while. I know you've been on a couple of trips and everything's been back and forth, but glad to be sitting down and talking to you. How you doing today?
Good, man. You had opening weekend last weekend. I was in Scottsdale the week before that. So it's good to get back here and talk a little Razorback sports.
Absolutely. We'll get to baseball. We'll talk softball. We'll talk football, but let's start with probably the hottest topic for Arkansas athletics right now. It's the Hogs' push to get to the NCAA tournament. Right now, if you look at any bracketology, Joe Lunardi has the Hogs as the last team in. Some projections have them a little bit higher, some have them on the other side of the bubble. But let's recap kind of the loss the other night against Auburn. It was 67-60. The Tigers end up pulling it out. What'd you think of the game?
I mean, Arkansas battled, and they've done that for a good chunk of this season. I guess with the exception of the Tennessee game, maybe the Illinois game to a certain extent, and the Missouri game. I mean, they've been in a lot of these basketball games this year. That's the number one team in the country. It's the best offensive efficiency team in college basketball, and yet Arkansas was up with about 3 minutes to go, and they let it slip away. They just don't have enough firepower. Again, on the defensive side of the basketball, they give you everything they have, but lack of shot making and the free throws really came back to haunt them. In addition to getting out rebounded, but still pleased with the effort. I think a lot of fans were. It wasn't enough to beat the number one team in the country.
Yeah, and to your point, you go 7 of 14 from the free throw line, and you go 3 of 19 from behind the arc. Excuse me. You're not going to win any games doing that. Like it's that
Nope.
simple. If you shoot 50% and you shoot, I don't know, what's three over 19. I don't know. That's too much math for me right now. But if you put up those numbers, you're not going to win many games. And the unfortunate thing that I kind of saw, and I love that you brought it up, where they had the lead in the last couple of minutes. We've seen this. This is now the third game in SEC play that at least I can remember. Maybe the fourth if you count LSU. But you had this game, you had Oklahoma, and you had Alabama, which included a shot at a possession with 30 seconds or so to go, down by one possession, so 3 points. And it's the simple mistakes. It's a ball goes off Ivicic's, pretty much chest or hands against Oklahoma. Then you look at that Alabama game, and it's kind of a similar process. Really bad execution down the stretch. Not to mention as well, actually, the Ivicic was Alabama. I'm thinking the weird, throw up layup from Nelly Davis against Oklahoma, and then you look at LSU, bad execution down the stretch. Now this game where Trevin Brazile knocks into Billy Richmond after Trevin Brazile did absolutely nothing. I think he put up goose eggs in his entire stat line and 2 personal fouls, but that was it. He had 1 turnover too,
Yeah,
and that's what
it
you're going to
was
remember from that game from TB.
front court wise, 0 points between Trevin Brazile, Jonas Adu, and Big Z. Big Z, the most surprising of those three, but still, I mean, if he has an off night, you got to get some help from your other front court players. And Jonas and Trevin, unfortunately, weren't able to add anything from a point scoring standpoint. And that's been the thing this year is they've occasionally had a guy go for 20 some odd points. But then if you look at the second leading scorer on the team in the games, it's like hovering right above double digits, like 11, 12, 13. It's not like 220 plus 0.9. So that's the thing that Cal has to deal with that he hasn't had to deal with in quite some time is just the offensive output isn't there from his basketball team. And I think you and I both think that there's no way he does this 9-man roster ever again. That was an attempt. It failed. And now we'll just have to wait and see if this team has enough gas in the next 5 conference games in Nashville to make it to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. Again, like you've kind of mentioned, that you look at the next kind of 5 games in the schedule, and it's not like you have any easy games. I'd say South Carolina should be your easiest game, but you're not
Yeah.
playing them at home. And you've got to go on the road. You've got to go to Columbia. I believe it's an early-ish start next Saturday. So again, that's one that's really intriguing matchup. And you still have a Mississippi State team who's knocked off some really big opponents. They just knocked off Texas A&M earlier this week, and it all starts tomorrow with Missouri coming to town in a game where you played him a couple of weeks ago. You got the production from Big Z. Nobody else really did much, and you lost by 30.
Yeah, and that's an issue that you want to hopefully resurrect tomorrow night. And you'd like to sweep Texas the following game at home on Wednesday night. If you could sweep Texas, who is playing a lot better, they're kind of on the same line as you as a possible NCAA tournament team or a bubble team. and maybe they're a little more highly thought of than just a bubble team. That would be great to split that Missouri game and beat Texas. But it starts with the Tigers tomorrow night. Dennis Gates has done an unbelievable job. Evan, think about going 0-18 and then being where they are right now. It's so impressive to what he's established, and he's done it through some quality transfer players, and they play team basketball. I've been really impressed with watching them this season. You just hope that there's so much emotion from the 1990 Final Four team being back in town. I know snow might derail and ice might derail some from making it to Bud Walton Arena. You hope that melts here in the next 24 hours, because you want that place to be rocking. And hopefully it is not just for the guys that are coming back and coaches and Coach Richardson and everything else, but also for this basketball team that could use a jolt tomorrow night.
I love that you brought up kind of the energy that Mizzou plays with, that they're a team. I always love watching any of their post game interviews that Dennis Gates or any of the players do, where they'll all run up to him and they're all crowd them. It's something that you almost don't see a lot with a lot of other teams in the country.
It's
Where
like the Thunder. It's like the
yeah,
Thunder, Evan. Yeah.
yeah, when you have all those young guys and going up, and it's awesome to watch. And that's actually a really fun comparison right there, the OKC Thunder to the Missouri Tigers. But again, I'm curious for you, right? You've been here, you've grown up a Hog fan. To see that 1990s team, like what to you does that represent, them coming back and trying to give a jolt at the last second for this late season push?
Well, first and foremost, I mean, it's about that team. Of course, you want it to affect Arkansas in a positive way tomorrow night. But that's more, it's more about that. Hey, it's been 35 years since you've officially recognized these guys, and they started the Nolan Richardson era. And I mean, Scotty and Corliss and the rest of those guys, I don't know if, and Corey and those guys might not be here if not for Todd Day, Lee Mayerberry, Oliver Miller, Daryl Hawkins, and the rest of the squad. So I think, I mean, the level of significance for this team, just being back all together, and unfortunately, some guys have passed away, which is just it's how life goes sometimes. It's so significant first and foremost, and second, like you're alluding to, none of these guys played or grew. Excuse me, none of these guys grew up in Arkansas.
Mhm.
So I'm going to guess, and I'm not sliding DJ or Trevin Brazil or Zavada Mirabic. They don't know the history and culture of this place. Like, this is not just Cal didn't just come here on a whim. He knows that he can win here, and there's Coach Sutton, Coach Richardson, and guys like this. And so it's kind of like a little history lesson. Again, it's 35 years. These guys were before I was even born, to be honest, Evan. So
Mhm.
honestly, like Dudley Dawson is the best, one of the best guys that you guys work hand in hand with, and Kevin McPherson, who those guys, I mean, watched it and took it in person. And I can watch all the highlights. I can read all the stuff. I can talk to former players, and I can talk to those two and anyone else. But just to hear the stories of what Barnhill Arena was like and how that morphed into Bud Walton Arena eventually, because you don't have Bud Walton without the tenacity of Barnhill initially. It's so cool to have these type of moments and the remember when setups, which is exactly what we have tomorrow night.
Yeah, there's historic moments that no matter what program you are in the country, that's a storied basketball team that I think is really important to remember and to cherish, and to really, pave on to the next generation and let the kids today who were born in 2004, 2003, 2005, 2006, and so on, have them understand what they're standing on, and have them have an
Yeah.
understanding of, how can I pay it forward as somebody who is now an Arkansas Razorback and will be one day an Arkansas Razorback alum, just like all of the guys on the court. So I think that's really important, and something that I'm really glad to hear your opinion on, that of somebody who's been around this program and been around, what it means to be Arkansas for so long. But let's move on. Let's switch gears from basketball. Let's talk football. I know a tough transition right there. NFL Combine starts up this week. There's 5 Hogs who
Mhm.
were invited. That went out about a week ago. Eric Gregory, Jaquindon Jackson, Landon Jackson, Andrew Armstrong, and Isaac Tesla. Look, the NFL draft, in my opinion, is really unique because all these guys will do drills on different days if they're going to go. And it's really, again, a chance to show who you are. I'm curious, out of any of them, who do you think is kind of the most slept on Razorback that's going to be there next week, or at least who was invited?
I, if Jaquindon was healthy, he's a dog, man. I think the Utah coaches would say that. I think Arkansas coaches, I think fans were like, man, when he's on the field, he's a beast and one of the best running backs. I mean, he led the SEC for a good chunk of the season on yards and touchdowns, and then injuries unfortunately derailed some of 2024. In terms of if you're an NFL GM or scout or something, you watch this kid play, he can play. That's the one, and I know he has a certain opinion of himself, which I appreciate. But I just hope for him he stays healthy. And I hate when you see talent and then you see guys just consistently get injured. It stinks, and hopefully that doesn't become something that he has to deal with the rest of his career. Because I know a good chunk of college he's had to. I mean, all those guys have an opportunity, some more than others, to make a team. I mean, Eric Gregory with big play in the Tennessee game, and not just big play, had a couple sacks on Nico, if I remember that right, including the forcing him out of bounds. Lando had the game against Alabama a year ago when he had three and a half sacks, whatever it was, and he was the best pass rusher, bull rusher on this team. Tesla becoming that number one in the bowl game, had a pretty solid game and makes plays, maybe the best hands on the team. But Andrew's just a cut above. I mean, Andrew Armstrong, you can make a case, was the top three wide receiver in the SEC. Him, Trey Harris for Ole Miss, and there's one guy, or Brian Williams for Bama, are probably the top three receivers.
Somewhere up there.
Burden would be in that category too. And Andrew, like, he didn't have a lot of other weapons around him, so the fact that he had that much success, and I know Taylor targeted him a lot, but I was so high, and I actually said, I think I've told you this, Eb, before the season. It's like he's gonna bust 1,000 because it's just the level. Like I just felt like he was so much better than anyone else on the team. And sure enough, even being injured that game one, he was remarkable for Arkansas. And I don't know if we'll appreciate how good he was in just this past season based on the team just kind of being that middling 6-6, because he was a special player for Sam Pittman and company.
And more than anything, like, just his attitude and the way he carried himself off the field, I thought was really impressive. If you go back to SEC media days, like, he was there joking with all the media and really being
Yeah.
like, I want to be here, showing what it means to be a Hog. And I love that. It's, you kind of look at these guys who are now leaving this Arkansas program and going to the combine. They're all guys that more or less Sam Pittman would say these guys are the essence of what it means to be an Arkansas Razorback. He said that pretty much point blank about Isaac Tesla, and as well as Landon Jackson at times. And a lot of these guys transferred in from other places. They're not,
Yeah.
necessarily homegrown Hogs, even though they are, because they played in the program for a couple of years and developed really here more than anywhere else. But I think it's just all intriguing when you look at what they could potentially be when you look at the NFL draft. And Landon Jackson's probably going to be an impact defensive end on day one. Like, let's face it. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a middle second round guy, maybe even, improves his stock and is a first round draft pick.
Evan, you hit on something really important there about the transfer. 4 of those 5 are transfer players. Eric Gregory, Memphis kid, 5th or 6th year, I'm forgetting.
Mhm.
He's the only one that started his career in Fayetteville. Jaquindon started in Austin and went to Utah and then came here. Isaac Tesla went to Hillsdale College. Andrew was at A&M Commerce. Lando was at LSU. That's how college football is now. And the norm is going to be the 4 guys that I just listed. Eric is not the norm. That's so rare. Him and Hudson were so rare to be here this long. So I'm going to find that really interesting. It's like, you kind of spoke to it a little there, who can get the most out of when a guy transfers and he didn't work out another place or he was unwilling to wait, like, who can mold a young man and the young ladies in college sports and really have success? Because you got to give Sam Pittman and his staff credit. They hit on some quality transfers. It's just the depth is always going to be an issue here in football.
Yeah, and when you look at some of the top teams in the country, it's what they're doing. Like, right? And I'll use Indiana as an example because, I always got to talk about my Hoosiers. But that's how Kurt Signetti built Indiana from a bottom feeder in the Big Ten to one of the top teams in the country. Like for us,
James Madison. James Madison.
We are James Madison Midwest, as I'll call it.
Yeah.
But just the idea of that's how you build a team, and that's how you go from being a 6-6 team, and it's hitting on the right transfers and hitting on the right guys, but bring the core guys back, like an Eric Gregory, like we'll see this year with Cam Ball, Xavier Story, even though he transferred from Georgia, probably going to be one of these guys we're going to be talking about in 12 months from now. who's going to look to the NFL draft as maybe a top linebacker in the SEC. So it's the way you do it, and it's the way you have to do it as college football continues to develop.
Yeah, Sorey is a big get for them, but clearly the best linebacker on this team. And Cam Ball is just so likable. It's been around here. He's talked about how the Arkansas coaches believed in him. So again, you got the parallel. You got a grassroots high school kid, which, by the way, Georgia, 3-star defensive lineman. Even in Georgia, to be a 3-star, to go in there and pluck him out, it's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So I credit Cam for staying around. And then, like you said, Xavier Sorey's 5-star kid coming out of high school, doesn't play a ton at Georgia, comes to Fayetteville, not instantaneous starter, but basically is. And he's going to be, like you alluded to, one of the better linebackers in the SEC. So it's got to be that push and pull, not just here in Arkansas with the kids that are quality enough to play in this league, but hitting on those kids. And I think Landon's a great example because he's a Texarkana kid. Arkansas was in his top 5, top 3, starts his career in Baton Rouge. You can't have deteriorating relationships. If a kid doesn't come to Fayetteville from the jump, don't go cuss him out. And I'm not saying they're doing this, but what I'm saying is, like, they need to continue. Like, I'm not talking about poaching and continuously texting the kid, but don't leave a bad taste in his mouth or his parents' mouths or anything else. And I think that's one of the reasons the staff is having success is even if they miss on a kid out of high school, there's always that off chance that he doesn't like where he's playing or not playing at all for that matter. And he's got a chance to play here in Fayetteville, Evan.
Absolutely. And you take that advantage and you run. And now we see where Landon Jackson is today. Before we talk about baseball and softball to wrap up our show, let's stick to football. One last big thing. There's been talks around the entire country about, realignment. The deal's going to be up, not realignment, I should say. College football playoff realignment. The deal between the schools as well as the governing body is going to be up in 2026. That's when people think there's going to be a lot of change. What's your opinion on this about the SEC and Big Ten getting X amount of bids and that taking away from some of the other leagues, even if they don't win their conference and as well as the, potential of reseeding?
I really enjoy reading Ross Dellinger, who covered LSU for a while for The Advocate and is now writing for Yahoo Sports, because he's talked about how the possibility of doing like the SEC championship game 2 plus like a 3v6 and a 4v5. The winner of those games go on to the SEC, or 1v8, 2v7, 3v6, 4v5, like that combination. I think what's interesting about the Big Ten and the SEC is apparently there's kind of an understanding that they're going to get most of the power and they're going to be able to lean on television and the College Football Playoff Committee on how this thing dictates from here on out, which I know the rest of the country doesn't want. But when you think about the national champions, the stat I always like to reference is every year since 2006, the SEC has been to the national championship or the college football playoff semifinals. There's not been a year since 2006 where the conference wasn't involved in this or that. You think about the Big Ten, they've won the last 2 national championships. Ohio State won the initial college football playoffs, so they have a say as well. Not as much as the Southeastern Conference does, but Indiana came up this year, Penn State getting to where they were. So I think it's pretty clear the 2 best conferences in college football. I just wonder, like, you didn't have the ratings that you were expecting following the Ohio State Notre Dame game. I'm wondering, is that like a fatigue of those 2 conferences? Is it because it's too long? I think they should play that game on like Friday night or Saturday night or something, to be honest, and Monday. But a lot of discussion, a lot of thoughts, a lot of questions that still have to be determined when it comes to the future of the college football playoff, Evan.
I think to your point, too, on Monday, 9 o'clock start, definitely a very strange time. I think it was like 8:45, 9 Eastern time start. Definitely a weird time on a Monday night. I think to your point, it'd do a lot better if you look at kind of that Indiana Notre Dame game to open it up. Really good ratings for that game, as well as the next night with Ohio State and Tennessee, where if you can capitalize on that Friday night, Saturday night slot, just like most college football plays on Saturday. If you're capitalizing on that slot, and again, there's a lot that goes into it with all of, scheduling and other leagues and stuff, but there's no reason, to your point, that you should not be playing the College Football National Championship on a Saturday night.
I know that ESPN has money on this and everything else, but slap it on ABC. Conference championship week in the NFL, they play 2 games on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So you, outside of college basketball, which doesn't hold a candle to college football, Evan, you have pretty much a monopoly on Saturday night. And I just don't, my pea brain can't understand why they wouldn't capitalize on that Saturday night time slot.
Right.
and put it on ABC. I get muddy, go back and forth, but that's the question I have.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll get an answer in the next year or so, but only time will tell. Let's wrap up. Let's go to the diamond. We'll talk a little baseball and softball. Baseball, it's a really interesting weekend from them. We'll start with them. We'll do this really quickly. You've got K-State and TCU, the two teams that have knocked Arkansas out of the Fayetteville
Yeah.
Regional the last 2 years. And then you got a Michigan team in the college baseball series down in Arlington that just beat Virginia and Puerto Rico last Friday and is 4-0. What's your take on the weekend? What are you most looking forward to seeing?
Well, you listened to Dave this week, or you had, and he talked about that he didn't necessarily think the K-State is a revenge game. What I said this morning on our show, Evan, is if this was another postseason series, then revenge is on the mind. But it's like it's the second week of the season. Are you really not that loss and this getting bounced in the regional is makes the guys that were here last year happy by any stretch? But that's not the motivation for this weekend. The motivation is not just kind of recruiting. But also just, again, having a strong impact that if you want to be a national seed at the end of the year, this is a weekend that you should try and win at least two. Dave's 7-2 overall in this over the years. There's a good chance he could be 9-3, heck, 10-2 by the end of this weekend. But it's just a cool event. Evan, you think about no more Dallas for Texas A&M, Arkansas games moving back home and home. So this is like the major event now that Arkansas fans, outside of maybe like NCAA tournament events, that they get to take in every year.
Right.
And so I would think it's going to be highly attended. My brother and a bunch of our friends are going, kind of envious. It's going to be awesome. But yeah, I just think it's also a chance for guys like Zach Root, who's going to be in a second start in Fayetteville. Some of these bullpen guys, they got a little action this past week at Baum-Walker Stadium. And then just some of the lineup, like, is Iredale going to do what he did last weekend? Like, is he going to continue that hot streak? There's so many things early in baseball that Matt Hobbs and Nate Thompson and Dave Van Horn have to figure out. And this is a weekend against some better competition that, hey, you can see who's going to shine under the bright lights, because they're going to be those in Globe Life.
DVH said they expect, 15 to 20,000 people potentially at these games. And I think that's a huge thing because this is your real first taste of SEC play. It's not SEC teams, but it's your chance to see, hey, where do we stack up against a team that's top 25 in the ACC, a team that's knocking on the door in the Big Ten of the top 25, and a K-State team that should have beat number 6 North Carolina a couple of days ago. So I think it's really intriguing. I'm most interested, I think, to see the battle at first base between Pepe, if Kendall Diggs is going to get a look there. He did not last week as well. Maybe we'll see Reese Robinette there. And also how the outfield and the lineup configures really as well as second base. I think kind of the right side of the infield I'm really curious about between Nolan Souza and Cam Kojal. Let's finish up. Let's go talk a little bit about softball there at the Mary Nutter Collegiate Classic out in Cathedral, California. Bree Ellis has just been on an absolute tear. I think that's the most impressive thing. What's impressed you about this softball team being 12-0 for the first time?
Yeah, best start in school history. I think the fact that Ellis didn't just win the co-SEC player, but the D1 National Softball Player of the Week. Courtney Deifel, I mean, one of the things that she's done is she's actually made softball from the casual Razorback fan. I'm going to speak broadly here. Fans are intrigued by it. And that was not the case 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And so now you just you're either watching on SEC Plus, or you're reading about it, or you're taking it in via social media. They've got a huge series coming up next month when Oklahoma is here in town, the best softball program in the country. And I mean, when they break through, when they eventually get to Oklahoma City, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. That's when you're going to see just softball in this state explode. And I think it's really cool to see Coach Hale and the ladies do what they've done at soccer at Razorback Stadium. You think about what they've done. Coach Watson did with the volleyball program, not this season, but the season before. I mean, there's a lot of, we know what track and field does on this campus, but there's a lot of things outside of, and I know you care most about football, basketball, baseball, but there's plenty of sports on this campus that are having success. You just, you hope it rubs off on the football and basketball team a little bit, Evan.
Yeah, soccer, Elite 8 this past year, Sweet 16. They've been there. You've got volleyball. They had the Elite 8 run like you've kind of mentioned. Not to mention the gymnastics team, who Jordan Weber, Olympic head
can't
coach,
forget them.
is over here, and they're a big matchup later tonight. They'll be back on the floor. I believe they're away and actually Fort Worth as well in the quad meet. But yeah, just great weekend. Like y'all also mentioned, excited to see DJ Gasso versus Patty Gasso here on the hill. That should be a lot of fun. Ty, anything else we missed before we go?
Man, I don't think so. It's hard to keep up with everything that's going on. Evan, I don't know how you feel, but there's just a piece of me that dies once the final football game of the season, i.e., the Super Bowl, is played, and I feel like a piece of me is missing till August. So, kind of yearning for football to be back, even though we're several months away from that point. So I guess I'll find something to latch on to. I guess we should mention that. How about the hockey
Oh
surge
man,
that we've had in the last week or so?
that
I know it's bigger in your neck of the woods. I'm from the South, so it's not as big. But I'll tell you what, I've been more invested in hockey the last week than I have maybe my entire life, Evan.
Yeah, I'll tell you two things really quickly on your football thing. Bears won the Ben Johnson sweepstakes. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. I am
Yep,
absolutely
yep, yep.
thrilled. So football is back. So I don't feel you're lost right now at football because it's the excitement. But when we go like 5-12 next year and it's a disappointment, I'll be right there with you. But on the other hand, you talk about hockey. It's been amazing to watch. Growing up, being from Jersey, I never played hockey, but I'd cover hockey in high school and do play-by-play for our high school's hockey team. So I was always around the game and had the privilege to go up to Lake Placid about 10 or so years ago and
Wow.
see that area. And I actually bought a USA hockey hat that's in my home in Florida right now. And I loved it because hockey needs it. Like hockey just destroyed the NBA All-Star weekend. Nobody was talking about NBA All-Star game. It was all about hockey and the fact that Gary Bettman went on a limb and just said, "We're going to make up this tournament with 4 of the top countries and see who watches." And the fact that they got, I believe it's 4.4 million viewers for this game was absolutely incredible. And what USA Canada last night, just such an awesome game. I was devastated when Connor McDavid had that game winning goal at the end. I was wearing my
Uh,
USA sweatshirt. It was so mad. But what is going on with USA hockey and hockey in general right now has been amazing for not only the game of hockey, but I think sports in general because it gives us something, a bit of a taste for the Olympics next year.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more, man. It's definitely intriguing, and Miracle is one of my favorite movies with
I
Kurt
watched it the other
Russell.
night. I
It's
did.
just
I had to.
you've been seeing that scene a lot lately, and like I kind of want to buy it since you just talked about your hat. I kind of want to buy a jersey now for the United States. That'd be sick.
So my buddy has a Micah Rusioni jersey. I almost bought one too a couple of years ago, like one of the knockoff
Let's
ones
go.
from China. I don't know if I should be admitting that here, but we are big USA hockey fans. Ty, as always, thank you so much for joining. I feel like that's a pretty good note to leave it on. That is going to do it for Hog Roundup with Tye Richardson. For Tye Richardson, I'm Evan Kamiko. We'll see you right back here next Friday.